Welcome to the Age Has No Limit podcast. If you're a person who is in your 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, or older, who was taught to stay in your lane, or maybe you believe your age limits you from pursuing new adventures, exploring new destinations, or that business idea you've been nursing, I invite you to stay and listen to the Age Has No Limit podcast. I'm Patrice Davis, and I'm the host of the podcast. I'm a mom of three, the CEO of Grants Works Consulting, and the founder of Ready, Set, Go Consult, a consulting business accelerator. I started a consulting business at 49, traveled to multiple countries, found the courage to love again, and I'm just getting started. Each week, I highlight ways you can live on your own terms, share tips on how to start or grow a business, and I feature guests who chose to redefine their lives and live outside the box in their own way. If this sounds like something you'll enjoy, stick around for this episode. If you're listening to us on your favorite streaming platform, please download this or any of our past episodes so you can listen on the go. If you're watching us on YouTube, please subscribe. It's the Age Has No Limit podcast. We're here to show and prove that your age shouldn't prevent you from designing and living the life you want. I'm your host, Patrice Davis. Let's get started. I'm really eager to begin my conversation with Dana Kaplan. So Dana Kaplan is a renowned award-winning educational coach for neurodiverse and out-of-the-box learners. She specializes in rich self-investigation as a direct pathway to disrupt and dismantle stigmas, conscious and unconscious biases, and shifting one's thoughts in order to build a compassionate community for all. Dana is a retired classroom educator, a certified trauma specialist, and coach for neurodiverse learners who has become an internationally recognized specialist focused on accessibility, inclusivity, and rich belonging in the word. Notice the word rich is showing up there twice. We're going to dig into that. Dana used her decades of research, education, and implementation experience with the power within and on holistic brain health to start DEED, that stands for Developing Empathetic Education with Dana. I love that. Just before the pandemic. In addition, she believes her late in life diagnosis of ADHD is actually her superpower that maximizes her niche approach to teaching, coaching, mentoring, and facilitating the process for deep self-awareness through non-judgmental self-observation. Dana's work helps people eliminate stigmas, release conscious and unconscious biases, and choose to build a vulnerageous, and I'm going to make sure I pronounce that correctly, vulnerageous, which is vulnerable plus courageous arena grounded in believing we all belong. Dana, welcome to the Age Has No Limit podcast.
Thank you so much. It's always fun to hear what I've written about myself and then to hear it back. And I'm like, wait, who are they talking about? Who are they talking about? That sounds like a really cool person. Like,
yes.
And then I'm like, oh yeah, it's me.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting because we do all this work in the world to make, at least I believe that we are all here for a purpose and to make the world a better place and how we get into it. And so when I hear people's bios, I'm always mystified because I'm so impressed by them.
Yeah.
And I still get starstruck even by the work that I've been lucky enough to do in the world because I never take it for granted. And I feel like the work that I do in the world isn't even work. It's like a gift that has been given to me that I get to do. So thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, tell me again what you do. I have your bio, but tell me what you do specifically for the people that you work with.
So I am a retired classroom educator, now educating the world. I am here to disrupt and dismantle what is happening in education. I'm a big believer in inclusivity and accessibility, period. If every child cannot walk into a classroom and receive the resources that they need in order to understand how they learn, then we're failing. And so I work very closely with clients one-to-one. I work with schools. I work with organizations to make sure that kids are understanding how they learn. At the end of the day, we're all neurodiverse. all work differently. And so and in order to make sure that kids understand how they're learning, um,
Mm-hmm.
and what their needs are when they are learning, it then transpires into how they communicate and how they build relationships and how they interact with the world.
Mm-hmm.
Also, more importantly, once they get out of whatever schooling they're doing, that
Mm-hmm.
they're able to go function in the world, that they're
Mm-hmm.
able to be able to have the uncomfortable conversations, that they're able to
Mm-hmm.
sit down and agree to disagree, that they're able to debate, they're able to understand, like, hold on a second, I don't even know what you're talking about right now, and I'm not
Mm-hmm.
gonna be ashamed or feel ashamed that I have no idea what you're talking about, but
Mm-hmm.
I would really love it if you would explain it to me, right? And
Yeah.
so for me, it's all about holistic learning and
Mm-hmm.
making sure that parents are on board, leaders are on board, kids are on board, everyone is really coming together as a collective.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, education is the fundamental bridge to humanity.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so,
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
so that's what I do in a nutshell.
It's so interesting because what you describe is when you say education is sort of the bridge to humanity, it's almost also like expanding on the role, not the job description of the teacher. What are your thoughts about what about that? Of a teacher, so
Mentor, a teacher is a mentor, a coach, a guide.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Also the
mm-hmm,
student. Also
okay.
very much the student. So if they're not willing to learn alongside the student because their
Mm-hmm,
egos are in the way,
mm-hmm.
problem.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point.
So for
That is-
me, the role of an educator, the role of a teacher is it's broad,
mm-hmm,
it's
mm-hmm,
all encompassing, and it's also one where we have to discern what hat am I supposed to be wearing right now for which student.
Wow, sort of like parents have to do with children.
Yeah, and which employee, right? Because
Yeah,
at the
yeah.
end of the day, you have a classroom of anywhere from 25 to 32 kids, depending
Mm-hmm,
on what grade, but then take it into leadership and take it into business. And you
mm-hmm,
could have a team of anywhere from 4 to 25 to 100 people. And you have to understand how they're all learning and collaborating and working together.
mm,
So it's really about A, putting your ego aside, B,
mm-hmm,
really being grounded and making sure that you're aware of what your surroundings are like. And
mm-hmm,
also making sure that you're checking in with everyone. And checking in is a really important piece to the puzzle. And
mm-hmm,
that's
mm-hmm.
how are you? And like
Yeah.
looking them in the eyes. How are you? What's going on? How's your
Mm-hmm,
day? How's your family? How was your weekend? And like
mm-hmm,
very specific details because the more you can let somebody know I care about you,
mm-hmm.
the more dedicated they're going to be.
Mm-hmm. But
Produce.
that also tells me, Dana, that, and I know that's probably a part of what it sounds like that may be a part of what you're advocating. And I realize we're going into the discussion before we have the discussion, is that obviously the way that we train teachers is wrong. The way
Yes,
that teachers are required to behave in the classroom is wrong.
yes,
Maybe even the way that we recruit teachers is wrong.
yes,
And certainly the way that we measure their performance.
yes,
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah, because I mean, having kids have gone through the system, and knowing that what you're describing is certainly not what teachers are doing. Many teachers are doing now, especially when you consider some of them may have as many as 33 kids in the room. You know, that's not what's happening now. Yeah,
to be very transparent, there are 6 words that I'd love to eradicate, and that is right or wrong,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
negative and good and bad.
yeah.
So when you're asking me these questions, wrong, and I'm saying yes,
Hmm.
wrong, yes, wrong, yes, wrong,
Hmm.
yes, we can change that.
Hmm. Hmm.
We
Hmm.
have choices. We have the
Yeah.
power to change what we're doing,
Hmm.
and it's up to us to make those changes. It's a
Yeah.
choice.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
when I
Absolutely.
chose to leave the classroom,
Hmm.
make a bigger impact in the world, that was part of my choice because
Hmm.
I was mentoring teachers, I was guiding teachers, I was leading teachers, I was leading leaders.
Hmm.
And when you are so stuck in your own way
Hmm.
and you want to make it the easiest way for yourself and forget about all the complexities of every other human that surrounds you, then we're failing.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. So I had another question planned for you. Let's jump right into vulnerageous.
Yeah.
Talk to me about what that is and how that shows up, right? When we choose to build a vulnerageous arena grounded in believing we all belong.
So I have two core beliefs, and that is that I will always show up authentically and vulnerably.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be scary for people.
Yeah.
And for me, it's very important that we teach children at a young age that showing up with who you are, how you are, and what you are
Mm.
is paramount.
Yeah.
And then the vulnerability behind it is walking through the door, right?
Mm-hmm.
Making sure that I'm being seen and heard and loved and valued for the person that I know that I am.
Mm.
And we're so conditioned in society to be what everyone else wants us to be. So there's no vulnerability in that,
Yeah.
right? And there's no courage in that.
Yeah.
So to be vulnerageous is to really have the courage to find your own superpowers within. And that's what I guide and I mentor and I teach children, families, adults, all ages, to find your superpower, to find the courage within, to be your most vulnerable self.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, no one is like you. You're
Mm-hmm.
so unique and so profound. So
Mm-hmm.
stop worrying and stop trying to be like someone else and instead be you.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I first thought of the word, I had heard it at an event,
Mm-hmm.
and it was interesting because there was a lot of conversation around that's such a ridiculous word. That's such a ridiculous word. Well, I make up words all the time. So of course I was like, this is my new word.
Yeah.
And so, and I've never taken ownership for the word because I didn't create it.
Mm-hmm.
So what I find so fascinating is that the people that did create it weren't even vulnerable enough to own it.
Yeah. 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 So that's funny.
So
You know,
for me, it's really important that like taking the leap, be who you are,
yeah.
test the waters,
Mm-hmm.
and also own who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you aren't, then somebody's going to take it away from you, and you're never, it's not that you're never, but it's really hard to come back to who you really are if you're too scared to be that vulnerable, courageous person.
That actually links with, I'm thinking about, the name of the podcast, the intention of the podcast, age has no limit. And part of a no limit life is, you know, throwing off what you said, concerns about what people believe. And I know, and I've shared on the podcast and other places that I was so concerned about what people believed or thought about me that I put on a mask. So I wasn't afraid to be myself, but I covered myself in order to fit in certain situations. Not, yes, actually, I think about it definitely in the workplace. And
Yeah.
also, even in my last marriage, I really couldn't be my full self. I was trying to conform to, and this is a person who says, right, that she's a nonconformist. I conform to a certain environment by numbing my personality. I conform to my past marriage by adjusting or adapting to that person's expectations. But yeah, so fantastic. I'm glad we started here, but I want to learn a little bit more about your time in the classroom. Tell us a little bit about where you taught, who you taught, and what you love the most about being a classroom educator.
I love that you brought up something very important, and
Hmm.
that masking up
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
unmasking.
Hmm.
So I have written an entire curriculum about unmasking, and
Hmm.
I created it for my classroom.
Hmm. Wow.
And
Hmm.
it's literally something that came organically with
Hmm.
the work that I do with children. So I will forever be a kindergarten teacher.
Hmm.
The joke was when I was 5 years old that I promised my parents that I will never forget walking into their bedroom on a random weekday in my navy blue dress with a white collar and a big boat on it. And I was like, I'm going to be the best dressed kindergarten teacher in the whole world. And my dad was like, you love to shop too much. You're probably going to need to find a new profession. And I was like, no. So I knew very early on, but I also knew very early on for a reason.
Mm.
Never felt like I fit in. And
Mhm,
fitting in is completely different from belonging.
mhm,
And
mm,
it's a concept that we all believe that we're supposed to fit in, but
mhm,
that's a societal construct.
mhm.
Belonging, we all belong.
Yeah.
Just from the moment that you were conceived to the moment you come into the world, you belong here. You were meant to be here.
Mm-hmm.
And so understanding at a young age that I was an out-of-the-box learner, I never conformed. I was so on my own path. Like everyone was like, you're too much. There's always something going on. You're too sensitive, and I would hear all of the labels and the limits. And I was like, what would happen if we were in a world where the labels and the limits stopped,
Mm-hmm.
literally stopped the labels and the limits
Mm-hmm.
and allowed people to be who they authentically are?
Mm-hmm.
And I struggled very much in school with test taking. I had severe anxiety, a
Mm-hmm.
conversation that no one ever talked about. And still, as much as we talk about, I call it holistic brain health, but the world calls it mental health. As much as we talk about it, there's still not enough
Mm-hmm.
resources and research and support around it.
Mm-hmm.
But I would have anxiety attacks before test. My teachers would just be like, go take a walk in the hallway. Like one of my friends had to teach me how to like meditate, and we didn't even know the word meditate then, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
calm your brain down and think about the ocean. So for me, going into education has always been a path and purpose and an intention.
Mm-hmm.
And so even when I was in college and I didn't get into the teaching school at Wisconsin
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't pass a test,
Mm-hmm.
I was devastated. And imagine how many times in life you're devastated because you
Mm-hmm.
want something so much, but somebody's telling you no because you didn't check off this box.
Yeah.
So when I went into education, my heart and soul was always rooting for the underdog. And that
Mm-hmm.
can be anyone. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter what your socioeconomic status is. It doesn't matter the color of your skin. It doesn't matter your race, your religion,
Mm-hmm.
your age, anything. Underdogs are the people that are always fighting,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
stay above water.
Yeah. Yeah.
I knew at an early age that I was fighting so much that I had to do something different to
Mm-hmm.
prevent the fighting to keep your breath alive, right? To
Yeah.
get oxygen. So I first after grad school, I worked in a Title I school, which is a low income school provided by the funding is provided by the state.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
And I experienced a lot of microaggressions, which people are like, how could you possibly?
Mm-hmm.
Because I was one of four white people working in a school of color. And for
Mm-hmm.
me, I belong everywhere. I want to make a difference. And if you only see the color of my skin, then you're
Mm-hmm.
already putting a label and limit and conscious bias on what I can bring to the table.
Yeah, excellent point. Excellent point. So, so provided some insight on the where you, why and where. What grades? Was it always kindergarten? Did you?
So I initially I was put into multiple grades.
Mm-hmm.
I became a substitute teacher before I became a full-time teacher. Came in as a leave replacement.
Mm-hmm.
I was working with kids from second to fifth grade in reading and writing, and
Mm-hmm.
I loved it. I loved it. It was so much fun, and I still knew though that they were missing something that they can only get in kindergarten. And
Yeah.
so when
Wow.
the opportunity arose for me to apply for a full-time job,
Mm-hmm.
I was dead set on being the kindergarten teacher.
Yeah, got
And
it.
I got the position.
Mm-hmm.
And what it is about kindergarten is that's where you find your voice.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
given the opportunity to find your voice. You're given the opportunity to stand up in class and show and tell. You're
Mm-hmm.
given the opportunity to express yourself and learn a vast vocabulary that we forget that kids are even open and willing to understand. I mean, my students learned words like trepidation and
Mm-hmm.
hysterical and actually learn how to use it properly in sentences and in their writing
Yeah,
because it's more about giving kids the opportunity to crush their own glass ceilings.
yeah.
So for me, yes, it's always been kindergarten. And I then, though, because of being an empath and being
Mm-hmm.
who I am and not being diagnosed with ADHD, but being able to manage 35 kids at a time. I had
Mm-hmm.
my own class
Wow.
of 5 kids, but
Yeah.
then the classroom was a revolving door for all the kids that were too difficult for teachers to
Mm-hmm.
deal with. And so, and I use that word intentionally, deal with, because
Yeah.
none of us are supposed to be dealt with. We're all
Mhm.
supposed to be welcomed.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really,
Interesting.
my room at my house was the welcoming door for the revolving door of all these students. So while I had my kindergarten class, I also had kids from other kindergarten classes up to fifth grade or sixth grade, depending on the type of school that it was in.
Interesting. Wow. Wow. That's a lot to unpack there. And I'm definitely going to come back to that. Being that person, like you said, the students that were quote unquote difficult to deal with, they ended up in your classroom, and definitely want to revisit that. Now, you are a retired classroom teacher, as you noted. And one of the things that I noted in your bio is that you are an educational coach now for neurodiverse learners. So let's start with, what is a neurodiverse learner?
I love this question. First of
Hmm.
all, I want us all to be very clear that every
Hmm.
single person on this planet is neurodiverse. We all have a different brain. We all have the same lobes and structures in our brain,
Hmm.
but how we learn and the way we learn and what we need to learn is
Hmm.
different.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
neuro being brain and
Hmm.
diverse being different
Hmm.
is very important for us to conceptualize. And that's an immediate way to break stigmas. It's an immediate way to get rid of conscious and unconscious biases. Because I am a very hands-on, tactile person. I mean, to be honest with you, I've been squeezing my squeezy horse this entire time, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
I have no shame in it. And I
Yeah.
work what I'm doing in order to stay focused
Hmm.
and also support myself so that my anxiety is down,
Hmm.
have a conscious conversation with you so that I can bring my best self to the table and talk about what we're not talking about.
Hmm.
I want to start there. Neurodiversity is one of the biggest gifts we can give. Now,
Hmm.
with that being said, diagnoses are needed at many, many times, right?
Hmm.
If you're on the spectrum, if you have ADHD like I do, if you have cognitive, behavioral, any kind of difference going on that needs a specific diagnosis, I am 1,000% about that,
Yeah.
because a diagnosis is not a label or a limit. A diagnosis is a ticket to thrive.
Yeah.
Diagnosis is a way for everyone to know what you need
Mm.
wherever you are, and it travels with you, right? So when you get these diagnoses as a child, or even as a young adult, or as an older adult, I've had a lot of older adults reach out to me and say, I just discovered I have a processing issue. And I'm like, that's amazing. I'm
Mm-hmm.
so happy you now know what's been challenging you,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So we look at it as a positive
Mm-hmm.
component,
Yeah.
right? And again, I'm very specific, and when I use the words positive and negative, because
Hmm.
positive is productive.
Mm.
I now know what you need in order to thrive. I now know how I can support you
Hmm.
in the classroom, out of the classroom, in social settings, when you're at a big meeting, right before you're getting on a stage in front of 1,500 people. What do you need before? What do
Hmm.
you need during? What do you
Yeah.
need?
After. Wow. Wow. Now, one of the things that you have on your Instagram account, I went and, of course, had a chance to take a look at that, is when you said that you spark joy and confidence in learners. Tell us what that means, that you spark joy and confidence in learners, and give us an idea of how you do that.
I love the question. So,
Hmm.
and thank you for asking, because it's one of my favorite questions. I do not believe in the word empowerment.
Hmm.
I don't
Hmm.
have the power to empower you.
Hmm. Hmm.
I do have the power, though, to spark interest in you
Hmm.
by bringing new concepts and igniting curiosity within you. I do
Hmm.
have the power to bring challenging topics to the table that you may not want to be discussing,
Hmm.
and help you create a space where you can calmly and collectively debate and discuss.
Hmm. Hmm.
But for me, it's about igniting someone's superpower in the process,
Yeah.
because we all have our own superpowers, but we don't necessarily know what they are. And sometimes we never know what they are.
Hmm.
For me, though, my superpower is igniting this curiosity and the excitement and learning and joy of discovering. And so, in doing so, it dismantles the whole concept that I have the power to empower you to do all the things in the world. That is so egotistical in my head.
Hmm.
And I speak about it frequently with a lot of people that even have empower in the name of their podcast, or in the name of their book, or in the name of this, or what have you.
Hmm.
wonderful conversation because it's been able to have people look at life in a different way. It's like, oh, you're right. It's actually my radical personal responsibility
Yeah.
to accept my power. It's
Yeah.
my radical personal responsibility to accept that I have the power within me to go
Mm,
out in the world and do all of these magical things that I desire and I want to do because I write my own success story.
that's
You
great.
do not have the power to make me write my success story, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where that comes from.
Yeah. That's interesting. Now, let's talk about Dana Kaplan, the person. So, where are you from, and what would you say is your biggest desire?
Oh my God. Okay, well, first where I'm from is very easy.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
And it's a big misconception.
Hmm.
People think I'm from New York, but I'm actually from the deep South in Columbus, Georgia, in Fort
Hmm.
Myers, Alabama. The Chattahoochee River is where we used to walk and still walk.
Hmm.
Um, and I think my biggest desire is making sure that everyone feels and believes that they belong in the world.
Yeah.
Um, that we create a space where we can have courageous conversations that may feel uncomfortable for you
Yeah.
and are easy breezy for me. And we have them because we're not educating kids in the sense of social justice. We're not educating the real history of what has happened in our world. We're fastly moving every kind of math algorithm to a new way of teaching, right?
Yeah.
And in order to be the most powerful person you can possibly be, my biggest desire and passion and intention is to
Hmm.
make sure that I pave the way that everyone can find their own way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, you are an educational coach. So, who are you coaching? Are you serving as a coach for school systems, for individual educators? Maybe you work with, I forgot what you call the people that are typically top of the school district, district supervisor. I don't know. Would love to know, who are your clients?
The best secret is
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
as a business owner. And
Mm.
it goes back to being in the classroom. When I was in the classroom, parents were constantly coming in and out. I had a revolving door of parents coming in and out all the time. And I wanted it that way. I want parents to be as involved as possible.
Hmm.
I launched my business and it was right at the brink of COVID,
Hmm.
running a bunch of small groups. And I still needed parents to be involved, but everyone was drowning.
Hmm.
Everyone was in this tumultuous situation where the uncertainty and the trauma and the heaviness of what was going on. So the way that I worked at that time was doing small group learning groups with children online virtually.
Hmm.
I still do them because I have students now that are global, and so there's no way for me to meet somebody in France unless we do it virtually.
Yeah, yeah.
But I work when I work with a family, I work with the entire family. It's not just
Mm-hmm.
a child. The parents have to be on board. They have
Hmm.
to be doing the work along with it. They have to be in touch with me. I'm very big on communication.
Yeah.
When I'm at the school, I'm working with the entire school. I'm working with the leadership, understanding their culture, their community, their purpose, and their how they run their school.
Hmm.
Is it aligned with my beliefs? Is it aligned with my core values? Is it aligned with, can I actually make an impact here? So in the beginning, when you first start out in your business, you're like, I've got to take in everyone. I've got to do work with everyone.
Hmm.
The reality is, though, is that I don't have to work with everyone.
Yeah, yeah.
People that are actually aligned with the work that I'm doing. So
Hmm.
now I'm working with schools that are very much aligned with emotional intelligence, that are very much aligned with having uncomfortable conversations. And so those are schools, community organizations. I'm also working with a lot of corporate America and working in corporate fields where we're having to reteach
Hmm.
yourself. So the reason I say I'll forever be a kindergarten teacher is because if you don't learn how to play in the playroom, you're
Yeah,
never how to play in the boardroom.
yeah.
So
Good
I'm
point.
working with teams to relearn how to communicate, to
Hmm.
relearn how to
Hmm.
really come out and share what they had to say, give their big ideas, make the impact that they want to make in the world, in the boardroom, across facilities that they're working in. So I'm working with all gamuts of people. The youngest I work with is 3.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
2.5-year-olds that I work with, but it's more of like the parents wanting to know, what can I do to channel their energy and how can I maximize their learning when we are together and when we're working. Predominantly when I do one-to-one work, it's with 3-year-olds to 4-year-olds. And then I work a lot with elementary to high school and even college students. Some of my students right now that are in college, and they're struggling because COVID really impacted all of us on the social level and an emotional level. And we forgot how to communicate, and we forgot
Yeah.
how to interact with people. And so it's much easier to hide behind a phone and text someone, or to do a Snapchat, or to send them a quick little whatever TikTok. And the reality is that my feelings are hurt because you didn't ask me to be in that TikTok video with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because you sent a Snapchat to 5 people and left me out. How do
Yeah.
I express myself in these contexts, right? So I'm
Yeah.
working with emotional intelligence. I'm working with academics. I'm working with how do we actually bring out the most productive ways to present a new product into the world of business. So it depends on what's going on. And my
Yeah.
favorite, I love working with grandparents because they think they get a do-over. They're like, well, I'm
Yeah.
at with my kids, so now I can do this with my grandkids. And so it's fun to see how everyone is using my expertise to benefit themselves. And that's
Yeah.
really I want you to benefit from whatever
Yeah.
I.
Yeah. For those of you who are interested in learning more about Dana and the educational consulting or education coaching services she provides for private clients, schools, organizations, and corporate, because as you were describing some of the things that you do for people within, work environments, I was like, oh, so there's an organizational development aspect to some of the work that she does as well. But if you want to learn more about Dana's work or to reach out to her about, possibly providing some of her services, reach out to her at danakaplanteach.com. So that's DANAKAPLAN teach, TEACH.com. And so you can go there and learn about some of her services. Are you a consultant or coach who spends too much time trying to find the right tools or the right systems for your business? If you're like I was early in my consulting business, I spent a lot of time researching which project management tool I should use, which CRM system, which website building and hosting company, which accounting software, and what other tools are best for my business. I also spent time creating email templates and even contract templates for clients and vendors. Chances are you've either done the same or you're doing the same. My name is Patrice Davis, and I'm the CEO of a consulting firm, Grantsworth. I'm also the owner of Ready, Set, Go Consult, a consulting business accelerator. I'm also the host of the Age Has No Limit podcast. I'm here to tell you about the Ultimate Consultants and Freelancers Starter Kit. The kit is a curated list of tools of the trade, templates, and other resources you'll need to run your business. It even includes the 6-figure proposal template that I've used to win 5- and 6-figure engagements. There's also a fluff-free summary of what it takes to build and grow your consulting or coaching business. Here's the thing. On average, consultants, freelancers, and other independent service providers work up to 65 hours per week. I created the kit myself because I know it can help you save time. Save time from hours of research and trial and error. It's what I would have wanted when I started my consulting business in 2020. Here's another thing. You can't grow a successful consulting business when your foundation isn't stable and when your delivery and systems are chaotic and outdated. Click the link below to learn more about the starter kit or visit readysetgoconsult.com/starter kit. You'll be happy you did. As a reminder, if you're listening to us on your favorite streaming platform, download this and any of our past episodes so you can listen on the go. If you're watching us on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe. Now back to the podcast. So you describe yourself as an out-of-the-box learner, and you acknowledge that you late in your life had an ADHD diagnosis. Share some thoughts about, what some of the thoughts you had when you learned or that you were diagnosed. I heard you say earlier that a diagnosis is almost an opportunity to learn what your needs are. And that was an excellent spin on that word. A lot of times we immediately attach negative, thoughts or connotations to a diagnosis, but it's really your body's way of saying, hey, I need this attention. And you need, and I'm so glad you you pointed that out. But we're going to go back to your question about some of the thoughts you had when you were first diagnosed with ADHD.
I laughed. I
Hmm.
actually laughed. I was like, thank you for another label and limit. Like, thank you. You know,
Yeah.
when you go through life in transparency, when you go through life and you are an anxious kid,
Mm-hmm.
you are always thinking there's something wrong with you. And you are told that you're sensitive, you're told you're too much, you're told, whatever narrative it is. And then you build these beliefs about yourself, and they become your core beliefs about yourself.
Hmm.
And ultimately it becomes, I'm not enough. I'm not good enough for
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
Even when I was nominated and received Teacher of the Year in New York City, I thought it was a joke. I didn't
Yeah.
believe people actually saw me in that space.
Yeah.
And very similar to how I responded when you read my bio, like my little girl self inside of me still is working on and healing
Yeah.
the narratives that I had about myself. So when I had always joked that I had ADHD because I'm so hyper and I can do everything. The
Hmm.
reality is it served as my superpower because no one else was capable of taking their students on 60 to 100 field trips a year.
Oh, wow.
There's only 180 school days a year, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
more than
Yeah.
half, more,
Yeah.
almost two-thirds of the school year out in the world because
Yeah.
I believe in real world teaching.
Yeah.
And for me, I was like, what's your point in telling me this? And
Yeah.
then finally, when it hit me, he was like, because you don't need to struggle so much.
Mm.
And then that's when I broke. That's
Learn.
when I broke down. That's when I let the tears fly and I
Yeah.
allowed myself to soak in, oh, yeah, there's actually nothing wrong with me. And I don't have to fight so hard.
Yeah. That's a good
Well,
point.
because having ADHD is also, it's sometimes it can beat the chicken before the egg. Do you have
Hmm.
anxiety and depression? Does ADHD cause that? You know,
Yeah.
and then other components, the organizational skills, the executive functioning, um,
Mm.
being on time, like procrastination, like there's so many other facets of what actually is going on. And so when I had this aha understanding of, oh my God, it's really not my fault that I'm always late. I don't realize
Mm.
that I need to set an alarm for 30 minutes prior.
Mm.
My
Hmm.
brain just didn't think about it. My brain is so focused on what I'm doing. And we also have a misconception that ADHD is hyper, like you're jumping around all the time. Like you can be hyper focused on a task and sit there
Yeah.
for hours. And I talk about that very much with a lot of adults because
Yeah.
like, I don't understand. I just sat here for 2 hours and the 2 hours passed and I got work done, but I didn't get as much work done as I wanted to. Well, because their mind started to wander. They
Yeah.
needed a personal break. They needed to get up and move their bodies, right? And so
Mm.
we talk about diagnoses and we talk about labels and limits,
Hmm.
really looking at what do I need to know about myself to thrive?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point. Yeah.
The diagnosis is to help you thrive. It is not to make you feel like there's something wrong with you.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the big misconception when we talk about mental health, when
Hmm.
we talk about, for me, again, holistic brain health, because we have a brain in our head, you have
Hmm.
a brain in your heart, and you have a brain in your gut. And if they're not all working together, you're not holistically aligned.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
have other symptoms. Like you could have IBS, you could have, you're not sleeping at night, you could be sweating all the time, you could be edgy, right? There's so many complexities to who we are as humans that
Mhm.
a diagnosis is really just letting us know what can I do to help me? Because
Yeah.
I matter. I
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah, that's a great point. Now, yeah, just rethinking the way that one sees diagnoses, and not only that, just really thinking about, um, just understanding. And I know you say you don't particularly like the word empowered. However, and you said that you don't believe that you can empower another person. However, a person can indeed empower themselves, right? What are your thoughts about that?
Um, I mean, in a sense,
Hmm.
I'm
And
taking
is a diagnosis a form of empowerment?
the diagnosis is
Potential.
allowing me to take my power back.
Okay, got it. Okay, okay.
And so it's not that I'm fighting this concept of empowerment because
Mm-hmm.
the reality is that it's kind of like I'm going to bring up COVID, for example. I'm a
Hmm.
unicorn. I never had it.
Yeah.
I, any of the symptoms are
Hmm.
personal. I've never experienced it. I only know based upon what everyone else in the world has shared with me.
Hmm.
If I'm sick and I have this horrible cold and then it turns into this horrific cough and I'm sweating and I lose taste and smell and I'm having all of these traits of what COVID is, I can
Hmm.
either sit there in denial,
Hmm.
which is what you do without having a diagnosis. You sit there
Hmm.
and, or I can go and take a COVID test,
Yeah.
find out that I have COVID, and I take my power back.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah.
Start to rest more. I start to, first of all, I stop seeing people, right? I make sure that I'm taking care of my body. I'm making sure that I'm nurturing myself. I'm making
Mhm.
sure that I'm doing what I need to do to get better. And
Yeah.
for me, it's about taking your power back.
Yeah.
And we're so quick to give our power away.
Yeah. Yeah. So the podcast itself is about redesigning our lives, or people redesigning their lives or reshaping their lives to align with their goals, their terms, their purpose. Um, what made you decide to focus on neurodiverse learners?
I think it happened organically, truthfully.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, if I had known buzzwords were going to be such a big thing, I could have already made billions of dollars off
Yeah.
of diversity, equity, and inclusion
Yeah.
and emotional intelligence and
Hmm.
diversity. I don't do that. I add, okay, I'm a very progressive thinker. I'm
Hmm.
also a very forward thinker. So I can see what's going to happen down the road before it actually happens. Not saying that I have
Hmm.
some superpower of like seeing the future, but I know what kids need in order to prevent. I'm about prevention.
Okay. Okay.
About prevention. It allows me to really come into my own and see what do we need to prevent so
Hmm.
we can prevent suicide, we can prevent
Hmm.
the breakdowns, we can prevent the lack of sleeping, what is happening in the holistic approach to the human.
Yeah.
And for me, it organically happened that I was working with neurodiverse kids because I started one of the most coveted gifted and talented programs in New York.
Hmm.
And gifted and talented children, gifted and talented humans are generally twice to thrice exceptional, meaning
Hmm.
they're gifted in one area, which could be academics, it could be music, it could be the arts, it could be anything, cooking, what have you. And
Hmm.
their talents could run miles.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah.
All of that. There's also this, are you socially aware? Are you
Yeah.
emotionally aware? Are you able to communicate with other people? Are
Yeah.
you able to sit still, right? Are you able to ask for what you need? Are you able to say, I need to take a break and walk around the building for a minute? If I'm working in an office or I'm working in a classroom, can I walk up and down the hallway, right?
Yeah.
When I created this gifted program, it really helped me see, number one, we must teach kids at an early age to crush glass ceilings because
Yeah.
it was a bridge class of kindergarten and first grade. And I taught everything on a first grade level to begin with because I realized that the kindergartners were quickly picking it up.
Yeah.
I was like, well, this is fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
If we remove the boxes and we remove the glass ceilings, like how far wide can kids go?
yeah.
Doing so, it really showed me with the research and data that I continued to collect every single year from teaching,
Hmm.
that as soon as we give kids what they need,
Hmm.
then they can thrive and they hold the pencil and pen to write their own success story.
Yeah. Yeah. So a word that you use quite often, let's see here. We talked about vulnerages, rich, the rich belonging in the world. So you use the word rich 3 times in your bio. Um, and of course, I can easily, think, okay, well, she means rich means she means it's something that is, it's, there's a bounty of it, right? And so what do you mean by the word rich? Such as, for example, you have, let's see here, rich belonging in the world, rich self-investigation. So I just know there is a reason why you chose that word. So I'd like to know what that reason is.
There is, because we're so consumed about economics,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which means money and materialism,
Mm-hmm.
means abundance.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Abundance of self-awareness. It's an abundance of self-love,
Yeah. Yeah.
of curiosity, and
Mm-hmm.
is infinite.
Yeah.
And so we can think about words in a different way and
Mm-hmm.
dismantle and destruct what we have these concepts are and
Mm-hmm.
what the concepts have been in our life. You're rich only if you have $1 million. You're rich
Yeah.
only if you live in a certain lifestyle, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Richness is
Yeah.
rich, being able to live boldly
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
courageously and to live your own path and to create your own path. And so that's really for me why the word rich is so important,
Mm-hmm.
because the only way we're ever going to change our thinking, to reframe the way that we look at words and the way that we look at what society has already created for us, is if we actually challenge. And so
Yeah.
I'm challenging everyone to really think deeply. What is
Mm-hmm.
belonging for you? What is rich self-awareness and self-acceptance? What does that mean for you?
Yeah.
And it's about critical thinking because it's missing. And critical thinking is one of the
Mm-hmm.
key skills that I teach from the get-go. And
Mm-hmm.
you learn it as young as 2 years old.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah. Hmm. Now, deed. Tell me, what is deed? And who benefits from deed? It is an acronym. Again, I want to make sure it's developing empathetic education with Dana. Is that, maybe a speech concept? What when I in other words, is that one of the things that you make sure that you factor into, your work, or maybe any of the talks that you give? I just need to know, would love to know what that is. Deed.
Yes, of course. So actually, when I was starting my business, I wanted something that aligned with my beliefs and my philosophy in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And my sister's friend actually came up with it. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason it made so much sense to me is because I'm all about empathy. And
Mm-hmm.
you develop empathy. You
Mm-hmm.
already have it, but some people don't. And so you develop it.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
having empathy is one of the most important components of who we are as a humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And deeds are what we do in the world every day. I am a big believer in giving back to humanity. I am a big believer in community service. I'm a big believer in teaching kids at a young age. The
Mm-hmm.
very first field trip I ever take my students on, in whether or not now it's with when schools hire me in their organizations, or if it's a program that we're doing now, or if it's when I was in the classroom, was always to a soup kitchen or
Yeah.
always to a food bank. And it was to make
Mm.
their kids learn how to give back, because giving is gratitude.
Yeah.
You make an impact in the world. You're doing a good deed. You're
Yeah.
doing something to change the world. And
Yeah.
so my whole premise is to stay out of the box and do as many deeds as you can in the world
Yeah.
while you're living and while you're being and while you're challenging the world. Because
Mm-hmm.
it's so easy to think, well, I can write a check once a year to, United Way and call that a gift. But that's
Mm-hmm.
not giving to the world. That's
Yeah.
not a consistent deed. And I want my students, I want my adults, I want everyone that I work with to understand that deeds are meant to be happening every single day throughout the day.
Yeah, that's almost like small acts of kindness. I know it's, but it just reminds me, because it's one of those things where, like you said, and I'm actually thinking it's almost has a multiplication effect, a multiplier effect, so to speak. Now let's talk more about Dana, the woman. What's the one thing, Dana, that you want to accomplish that you haven't accomplished yet?
Hmm. Um, I think, goodness, that's a big question. It's kind of a loaded question, actually.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I had this big dream of having a summer camp
Mm-hmm.
that is going to be by the beach. I had no idea when I was in New York, and even being here in Florida, where I am now, even being in Atlanta, when I taught in Atlanta, I had no idea how many kids had never been to the beach. And so I
Yeah.
have this big, massive dream of
Mm-hmm.
having a 501(c) where it's going to be a summer camp, and the entire family comes to this compound, and it's
Mm-hmm.
going to be on the beach.
Mm.
It's going to have physical therapists, occupational therapists, cooks, everything, so that kids and families can feel like they're in summer camp
Yeah.
while receiving the resources that they need in order to thrive,
Yeah.
um, and to give them experiences that they've never had before. So
Yeah.
it's a really big dream I have.
I like that. And I'm actually envisioning that and wondering why that hasn't been designed yet. Or maybe it has been, but I really do like that idea. Number one, it could be as simple or perceived as simple as, taking vacation up a notch, which I know it's not that. Really, it's an opportunity for you to work with both the child and, of course, the family. Um, it sounds like a fantastic idea. And then, of course, they're by the beach, and so people are going to be more open, more receptive, hopefully, to some of the new, either coping or other skills that you're going to be teaching. So I think that's a fantastic idea. Am I understanding or am I describing that correctly? Or
All right, it's a very out of the box way of giving back.
yeah.
I want to make sure that these are families that are low income, can't
Hmm.
afford to go
Hmm.
on big vacations, but if it
Hmm.
feels like an educational vacation is what I want it to feel like.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want it, and it's for everyone. It's for anyone. It can be for the single mom that can't afford to take their child on a trip,
Yeah.
that still lives in a really nice apartment. It's
Hmm.
it's for the family that, has five children and they can't afford to go to Disney
Mm.
World, but this would give them the opportunity to still do something as a family, to grow
Yeah.
together, to expand together.
Hmm.
And the cost for them would be very, very little, but
Yeah.
there will be cost on their end for
Hmm.
investment. I think
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm a big believer in making sure that we all invest in what we're going to be doing.
Yeah, because then you're much more invested also in the outcome, or at least trying to achieve the outcome. So, Dana, what does an age has no limit life look like to you? Like, and how do you, what does it look like? And quite frankly, how do you think you've lived a life that was limitless?
It's such a great question.
Hmm.
And I'm really grateful you're asking today, because yesterday was a roller coaster of a day when I was like, have I done enough? Have I mastered enough? Am
Hmm.
I even on the right path? And I think it's important that we don't hide behind the,
Hmm.
masking up about everything's so beautiful.
Hmm.
Um, I've always been a late bloomer. I've always done things on my own time.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm still single. I am
Hmm.
very much out in the world, living my life boldly and vulnerably as much as I can. And
Hmm.
for me, I think living a life without limits and I have a dream of living until I'm 125, but being able to do it with maybe a walker. Like, I don't
Yeah.
want any assistance. I'm not in an assistant living space. I want to be able to see the world that is transformed and changed because all of the hard work and all of the investment that I put into the
Into
world
it. Yeah.
moving forward.
Yeah.
And for me, I really think that living limitlessly is believing that you can.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a great way to summarize it, right? It's believing that you can. So, I'd love to tell the audience, where they can find out about you again. So, for those of you who are interested in hiring Dana to either speak or to serve as an educational coach, remember you can visit her at danakaplanteach.com, DANAKAPLAN teach.com. You can also follow her on Instagram at Dana Kaplan _deed. So she, of course, was able to, build in deed into her Instagram handle. You can also follow her on LinkedIn and Facebook, and apparently you are also on YouTube. Tell me some of the things that you cover on YouTube, and why should a person want to come and watch some of your videos?
I think you're inspiring me to do more on YouTube, truthfully,
Mm-hmm.
after having this conversation, because we've literally covered so much in such a
Yeah,
short time.
yeah.
I used to do small little vignettes of like how to speak with your kids and how to get your kids to get excited about learning.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I also have a lot of, so I did personal stuff, but then I also have a lot of podcasts that I've been on. I love being on podcasts. People find me, they ask me to be on their seminars and to speak, and I'm always so honored. And so I want to promote it and have it available for people. If in 2 years, somebody could find our podcast and it could,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it made a difference. And so that's really that's what YouTube is for me. It's more of a platform to make sure that everyone is having all access to the different resources that I
Yeah.
provide.
And which is interesting because we started out talking about accessibility. I think you were probably speaking no, actually, when we say accessibility is just that, making sure that people that are looking or searching, or sometimes maybe not intentionally searching, they are able to access the content that you're going to be sharing, certainly access this podcast, like you said, a few years from now, and be able to benefit from it. And I think what you're actually doing is helping me understand how important that is, so that people can benefit, more can benefit, and they can truly benefit because now they've been able to learn, which started with, of course, being able to access it. It sounds like I'm rambling, but I really am kind of connecting the dots. So,
Absolutely. What we've
mhm,
done,
mhm,
like, we've
yeah,
just done bridge together and put all the puzzle pieces together. When we think about accessibility, we often think about, is there a ramp into a restaurant? Is
yeah,
there a handicap parking spot near the restaurant?
hmm,
In the classroom, is there a desk high enough for a person to sit in a wheelchair?
hmm,
Accessibility is everything. I love to read.
hmm,
I sit and I'm working so much. So
yeah,
the love of reading, my love of reading started to to diminish, and I'm
hmm,
getting angry about it.
yeah,
Imagine being angry about your love for reading. What
hmm,
was really happening was that I couldn't sit still to read a book because I was
hmm,
sitting so much. So I had to find a new way. And
hmm,
I always teach my students, listen to audiobooks while you're reading your regular books. Listen
yeah,
to the book if you're unable to, especially with my students that have dyslexia and it takes them so long to read, but they come
hmm,
so much more from listening to an audiobook.
yeah,
I was like, why am I not allowing myself to do what I teach?
yeah.
Gone through, no joke, this summer. I think I've gone through 100 books because I've listened
Wow.
to so many, through getting up and going for a walk. Like after we finish talking, I'm going to go for a 20-minute walk. That's
Yeah,
20 minutes of reading,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Beauty of having opportunities for ourselves
Hmm.
is really what accessibility it is. And
Yeah,
and it's making sure that we're giving to ourselves.
yeah.
Are we making sure that we're accessing everything we need in order to thrive?
Mhm.
I love books. I love history. I love
Mhm.
nonfiction. I love informational text. I love historical fiction. Like, I love everything. And I was missing it.
Yeah,
For
yeah,
what? For
yeah,
what? Because
yeah,
I couldn't sit still long enough to like lay on the couch because
yeah,
then I fell asleep. Like, now I don't have to do that. Now I get to like give back to my passions. And
yeah.
so accessibility is really what you just did. It's making sure that you're putting all the puzzle pieces there and they're
Hmm.
all going to fit the way you want them to.
Yeah, that's a good
Very
point.
know that. You
Yeah.
could gaps in your puzzle piece to
Mm.
put together.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Dana, thank you once again for being a guest on the Age Has No Limit podcast. I really, really, one of the things that I think we didn't loop in enough into this conversation, and I'm sure we'll make it into the final edit, just all the wonderful things that we talked about before we officially started this podcast, and so that people can understand really your philosophy, your approach, and how your approach and this new vision that you have for education um, is, helps us see education and the impact that the educational institution, if you want to even use the word institution, and the educator, the impact they can really have on children. And I think overlook it, and I will definitely make sure it makes it to the final edit, because to me, that's that no limit approach to what education can be for all of us. And so that's really how I see you fit into this no limit approach to life. So thanks again for being an excellent example for our listeners that indeed age has no limit.
Thank you for having me. Honestly, I am privy to being on a lot of podcasts, and this is definitely one that I will hold dear to my heart. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Age Has No Limit podcast. Except for when we take quarterly breaks, we release a new episode each week featuring people who decided to live a no-limit life, or featuring tips or lessons learned from me as I create my own no-limit life. By the way, don't forget to subscribe. I look forward to sharing our next episode with you. Just remember, age has no limit.